on July 4th, 4th of July, we go out to some friend's house, and we get out there mid-afternoon, and we go out and we play on the water. We come back. We usually have dinner at about 8 o'clock, and then we settle in for fireworks, which gets started when it gets dark about 10:15. And every year, as I'm sitting there, I think, we will pay for this in November and December when it gets dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But then, I think the thing that saves December is the holiday lights. I think it would be really, really hard without all the houses being decorated and without all the trees and all of that. It's the lights that make the darkness of the season bearable. Last week, I quoted from Fleming Rutledge, and if you don't know her, you should read her. And this is one thing that she said about Advent that I really liked. Advent is the season that, when properly understood, does not flinch from the darkness that stalks us all in this world. Advent begins in the dark and moves towards the light. In a world of profound darkness and distress, pervasive sin and evil, we look to the one true light, Christ Jesus, the Son of God. This morning, we're talking about darkness and light, and we're going to watch our third Advent video.
Welcome in, everyone, to the Harbor Cove podcast. We're currently doing a series where we're talking about how individual people within our community have been in a particular place, maybe a very dark place, a difficult place for various reasons, and then Jesus came in and impacted them, changed their heart in some way, and brought them to a new and better place. And today, we've got Joshua Ellis on the podcast, so welcome, Joshua.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So Joshua, tell us a little bit about you and maybe your family.
Yeah, it's me, my wife Stephanie, and my two daughters, Zoe and JJ. We've been in Washington, I guess, a little over 5 years now, and made this home. We're originally from Alaska.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
Came down because of my job and kind of bounced around a little bit, but eventually settled here in Gig Harbor. And
you're on the podcast today because you volunteered. Thank you again.
Yeah.
To kind of open up a window into a part of your life that maybe involves some darkness, right? You were in a place of darkness. And so can you tell us a little bit about the story there, starting wherever you feel is right to start?
Yeah, I think for me, it was kind of always there. Like I think I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. And it wasn't until much later in life that I even realized that how not normal it was. It was kind of in my recovery and journey here. It's I would equate my darkness to denial, denying what was like, denying the darkness and the sin that was in my life as a child, what had happened to me, and then that carrying on into adulthood that I was even able to deny even the things that I was doing. It just grew into unhealthy habits and using those as coping mechanisms at an early age. Mm-hmm. And not knowing how to handle it, felt very alone, felt very unseen by all appearances on the outside from my family. It was like a very perfectionistic family. Like you wouldn't have known anything was going on.
What was a turning point for you where, you started to come out of this darkness or seek more light in your life? Or yeah.
I think a big turning point was when the pain finally got to be more than the consequences of letting it out. And so a big turning point was in our small group, and I had finally started to share some of this stuff with Steph, but we actually shared it in our small group. So to be that vulnerable and finally like share parts of myself that I'd never told anybody before, I feel like that was a turning point of like letting the light finally shine in and to see the change. And then from there, that kind of, it wasn't like all at once. This happened over a period of time, but I feel like that was a big turning point from where just kind of that active confession and sharing where things started to change. Started a lot of counseling, started a program called Celebrate Recovery, which has been huge as in my journey. Yeah. Just being able to connect with other people that are, may not necessarily have the same issues, but are struggling. And it's just, I guess for those of you that don't know, it's a Christ-based recovery, 12-step recovery program. And yeah, that has been life-changing. Having a heart of wanting to be connected and to learn more about Jesus in the process, but like wanting to be part of a close, connected community. And I think that was what really kind of laid that foundation of like feeling where I could be vulnerable in that setting. That was just literally being the hands and feet of Jesus. I feel like through this whole process, the Lord has just really carried me, carried my family, carried my wife, and we've just been surrounded by support that I wouldn't have thought was possible. I thought, I was unlovable, that there would be no redemption for me in this if I ever shared this. And that just wasn't true, and that wasn't what I was met with. And it was incredibly powerful to witness that, to receive that.
Joshua, thank you again for sharing how God has been changing your heart from being full of darkness to being full of light. And I really appreciate the vulnerability and the things that you shared. And if you would like to see more of this conversation and hear the full conversation, we are releasing it on our podcast. You can find that at harborcove.church/podcast, or you can watch the entire interview on our YouTube channel. So check it out.
I'm just really grateful for everybody that's shared on the videos. Not only because of how brave it is to share about your own stuff, but also what a testimony that is to the transforming power of Jesus in their lives. I think it's also been helpful for us to be able to look at the stories that we've been telling and understand that everybody's dealing with something. And that means that there's room for us in this healing path with Jesus too. So we're going to be looking in Isaiah today. Part of it will be very, very familiar, and part of it will be not somewhat familiar. Looking at Isaiah 8:19 through 9:2. When someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction and the testament of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking up will curse their king and their God. Then they will look towards the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. We understand that sentiment. And Jim captured that so beautifully in his prayer this morning. I mean, we get what it feels like to be walking in darkness, to be living in a land of deep darkness. We look around and there seems to be so much darkness on the world scene. I mean, I don't know how things are going to turn out in Syria. I'm praying over there about that. But I'm looking at the juxtaposition between some of the pictures I saw this week of Bashar al-Assad's garage with all of his luxury cars, juxtaposed against these people who have suffered under atrocities, being released from prison, hiding underneath rugs, and it's just mind-boggling. I look at so many places around the world where innocent people are being displaced or bombed for some not quite understandable political gain. There was the assassination a couple of weeks ago of the CEO of a healthcare company. And no matter what you think about the state of healthcare in the United States, it's never justifiable to assassinate somebody. I talk to my friends in the classroom who have to deal every day the challenges that they face with editorial comment on my behalf, the complete breakdown of the family system, and yet try and educate kids. It just feels dark out there. And then closer to home, I was reading yesterday about a series of purse snatchings from older women in Gig Harbor. And then there were some dudes who were trying to drag off an ATM over on Point Fosdick. And then I look around our church, and there's lots of challenging, lots of worrying things that are going on in the lives of people just in our church family. I look at everything in my life, and I have so many blessings in my life. But there have been a couple of times over the past several weeks where I've been like, really, God? I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed here. And into this pervasive darkness, which creeps over us like fog on a winter morning, this darkness which feels like it is overcoming us. Into that darkness, Isaiah speaks and promises that God, through Jesus, is bringing light into the darkness. And one of the glories of the testimony that Josh shared was that we also have this darkness within us, and God doesn't leave us there. God doesn't leave us in the dark, nor does God cast us out into the dark. God brings the light of Jesus into the very center of our hearts, into the very center of our lives, and that is incredibly good news. It makes me think about a passage that we will share on Christmas from John 1. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. I mean, those are promises to cling to. There's light entering into our dark world. But Advent also reminds us what we already know too, and that is that we kind of live in this already but not yet of Christianity. The light is coming into the darkness, but there's still darkness. The light hasn't overcome it completely yet. It's a reminder, though, that the darkness doesn't win, even though it doesn't disappear right now. But the light is holding the darkness at bay, and we don't have to wonder which way it's going to go, because July will come again, and the light will be here. So there's more, though, in this passage than just the couple verses that we know about light. Did you notice the context of the verse, the first several verses that I read out of Isaiah chapter 8? When someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? I mean, what's the deal with that? I mean, we're all happy and light, and all of a sudden we're talking about seances. Well, welcome to Isaiah. That's just kind of what Isaiah does. But Isaiah, just to remind us that the Bible is written to a specific group of people at a specific time in a specific context. And they're living in a very tumultuous time. We've been talking about that the last couple of weeks. There's these cycles in Isaiah, 3 of them leading up to chapter 39, where there is all kinds of upheaval going on, and God sends Isaiah to say, you people need to get your acts together. And if you don't get your acts together, there are going to be consequences. So there's this going on, there's this tumultuous time going on that God is speaking into. And people do not like uncertainty. I mean, lots of times we can deal with whatever it is we need to deal with if we just know. We want to know what's going on. We don't like it when we don't know what's going on. I mean, think about whatever's going on with the drones over New Jersey. We just want to know what is the deal with that. And so the same was back then. I mean, people are looking for understanding. They want to know what's going on. They're looking for security. There's wars and rumors of wars. People are looking for reassurance. And when people are nervous, they want more information. It's just reflexive. It's like there's something that I can control if I have a little bit more information. And so Isaiah is asking a question into their insecurities, into their anxiety. And the question that's being dealt with is this: when you're living in difficult and dark times, where do you look for answers? Where do you go for hope when you're stressed, when you feel like you're living in the dark? Now, I have no idea what the real truth of the matter is, but from everything that I can piece together, Ronald and Nancy Reagan were people of sincere Christian faith. When they lived in Bel Air, they were members of Bel Air Presbyterian Church, and I have no reason to believe their faith wasn't genuine. I had friends who used to work on that church staff, and they were like, oh yeah, the Reagans are here all the time. If the Reagans are in town, the Reagans are at Bel Air Presbyterian Church on Sunday morning before their presidency and afterwards. But something happened in 1981. Many of you are like, that was like a century ago. Others of you are like, I remember that day. 1981 was the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. And it so shook Nancy Reagan, from everything that I have read, that she began to grasp at straws in order to have some assurance that he was going to be okay. And I can't necessarily judge that because I have never been in that situation. But one of the things that she did to try and find answers to make sure that he was going to be okay was she started to see an astrologer named Joan Quigley, who could read the stars for her and tell her whether it was propitious or not for President Reagan to do certain things. That was what she did when she was faced with this extreme unknown. I've got to get more information. I've got to be able to figure this thing out. When we are stressed, when we are in unknown situations, when we need advice, when we need help, there are all sorts of places that we can turn to. Some are more helpful than others. Now, maybe you aren't going to an astrologer. I hope you aren't. But there are all sorts of places that you can look for answers. Your friends, social media influencers, therapists, all sorts of places. We're going to look for answers. We want comfort. We want assurance. But where we look is important because the advice that we get will vary widely depending on who we ask. And sometimes we will even go all the way down this list of advisors until we find the person who will tell us what we want to hear. I have a couple of people that I know will not tell me what I want to hear, if that's not what they believe is true. And those are the people you want to keep around you. The people who just rubber stamp what you want, those people are not the people you want to seek advice from. The people that tell you to do whatever feels right or tell you to just be true to yourself, those are the people you can safely ignore if you want to make a good decision. The people that remind you of what is good and true and pure and healthy and righteous, even if you don't want to hear it, those are the people you want to hang out with. Because trust me, the other people might be more fun, but they aren't really your friends when push comes to shove. Who we listen to matters because the quality of advice they give will be different. There are also, when we are in pain, when we don't know what to do, when we are unsure, there are places that we can go simply to anesthetize ourselves. We don't see anything changing in our life. Maybe we're in denial. Maybe we just don't have the energy left at the end of the day. Maybe we just want the easiest thing that will make us feel better. So we go for a quick fix that makes us feel momentarily better. Comfort food. And for some of us, we just enter into eating. For some of us, it's gossip. For some of us, it's dark corners of the internet. For some of us, it's taking advantage of the fact that we travel and we go to cities where no one knows anything about us. We find all sorts of ways to anesthetize the pain so that we don't have to live in it. The problem is that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas is a lie. It doesn't. Because what happens in Vegas, and understand for those of you that are literal, this is a metaphor. Because I just know somebody's going to come up to me afterwards and go, I've never been to Vegas. What happens in Vegas, metaphor, leaves a mark. And the mark will go with you even when you get on the plane and leave. Because what happens to us sticks with us. You cannot just pretend and live two different lives. You cannot pretend that if you are two different people that you can maintain that. You will suffer from it. So Isaiah asks, why consult the dead? In this context, it really is referring to mediums and spiritualists and saying that dead people can't really help you. Put away the Ouija board. But essentially what Isaiah is asking is, why consult the thing that isn't going to bring you life? Why do the thing that is just going to bury the pain? It's not going to help fix the pain. Why ignore the truth? Sometimes we turn to the darkness for comfort, but it sucks out our souls, always. There's also another side to the coin, and that is that we need to be aware that not only do we ask other people for advice, but other people also ask us for advice. And as followers of Jesus, I think it's really important for us to understand that when people ask us for advice, we have a sacred trust. We have a sacred trust to give not only good advice, but to give godly advice. Because when push comes to shove, people are going to do what people are going to do. But you need to give them godly advice, not what they can get anywhere, even if it's costly because you really want to be a good friend. Megan and I have a very good friend, not so good anymore, who has just made a complete and total mess of her life. She has lost everything. She's lost her job, she's lost her family, she's lost her marriage, she has lost everything because she only listened to the people who confirmed her worst impulses. She needed somewhere along the line, many times along the line, she needed real friends who would firmly and lovingly say, "You're destroying your life." Not just people who are like, "Let me help you destroy your life." We have a sacred trust when people ask us what they should do to give them good and godly advice. And Isaiah has this warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, the word of God, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they're famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward, will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they'll be thrust into outer darkness. There's some pretty colorful language in there. Distressed and hungry. They will chase after things that don't satisfy them, and they will only grow hungrier. And the progression will continue until their misery drives them into complete and total darkness. No matter whether they look up or whether they look down, all they will see is darkness. And this was our friend. And this is so many of us that have struggled with addictions or have anesthetized ourselves or have just made a series of poor choices. There are behaviors and there are actions that promise happiness and relief from emotional pain, but they don't deliver on their promises. They hollow us out instead of filling us up. They bring us darkness rather than life. But we have another choice. Verse 20, consult God's instructions and the testimony of warning. As Jesus followers, we live by a different story. There's a different story that we live into. Culturally, there is a story. Culturally, the story is that we all are independent thinkers. We are masters of our own destiny. We are choosing our own fate. But we are now in Christmas, and you don't even know what you want until an advertiser tells you you want that. That's how independent we are. We don't know that we should be unhappy until someone tells us we could have more. We were perfectly happy with the garden view room until we saw the full oceanfront room. We didn't know until somebody told us that what we have isn't good enough. But we live in a different story as followers of Jesus. Our story tells us that happiness and joy don't come from stuff, don't come from possessions, don't come from hoarding. Happiness and joy come from following Jesus. Happiness and joy come from giving ourselves away. Happiness and joy come from keeping our promises. Happiness and joy come from trusting God for the good. Our story tells us that we don't live by a zero-sum game. You don't have to lose in order for me to win. In the kingdom of God, everybody wins. Why else would so many of us give away thousands of dollars to people in our community who will never be able to do anything for us, who will never return the investment that you have made in them? Why else do some of you give your time and your money to advance the kingdom of God? It's to tell a different story. It's because you've discovered the joy in serving in Jesus' name. You've discovered that all kinds of things are great for you to have, but it's also pretty cool to give a kid who sleeps in a van a sleeping pad. True story, happened this last week. Megan was talking to a fifth grader at their school, He was talking about, their living arrangements just happened to come up. He's living with his mom and his dad, his brothers and sisters in a van. And he's the one who has to sleep on the floor. And the floor of a van is hard. And so we found out about that need, and we were able to buy, seriously, just like a backpacking pad, just something to put on the floor of the van so that the kid didn't have to sleep on the floor of the van. And he gave it to him, and he cried because he had never had anything like that. That's the type of thing that brings joy. I was able to go this last week. I go every once in a while to Celebrate Recovery, which meets here. And as part of their program, they were reading this passage. And one of the things that they said, I thought, oh my gosh, this resonates with me. They're givers and takers. Takers eat better, givers sleep better. We live in a different story. Our story tells us, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We find light and life in Jesus nowhere else. And the closer we get to Jesus, the more light we have, the more fulfilling our lives become. And so we live differently. We have different priorities. And I like, there's this thing about, the testimony of warning in there. And the testimony of warning is that we're aware what happens if we don't follow God. We remember what our lives were like before we began to follow Jesus. We remember that there are consequences to our actions. One of the most poignant lines in Josh's video is when he said that the pain got to be more than the consequences of confessing his behavior. And he didn't think that there was the possibility of redemption. But he and so many other people were met by Jesus through the community of light, through us, the people who are walking out of the land of darkness by the grace of Jesus into light. And this is why we so jealously guard the character and mission of our church. Because Harbor Covenant is not a perfect place, but it's a good place. And we've been able to create something really special here by the grace of God, where we're honoring God by focusing on what's really important and living out the gospel. Now, we still have work to do, and there's still work to do in our world. There's still a lot of darkness out there. But Christmas reminds us that the light of God is coming into the world. And we know the trajectory. Because when we get all the way to the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, it describes the city of God. And in the city of God, there is no sun or moon or stars, because there isn't any need for any more light, because the Lamb is the light of the world, and there is no more darkness. So let me ask you 3 questions. Number 1, how does the promise of light coming in the darkness give you hope? Number 2, to whom or to what are you looking for light and hope? Number 3, when you have the opportunity, does the advice you give people push them toward the light of Jesus or away from it?
Hi, thanks for watching. The people of Harbor Covenant Church really want you to know the love that God has for you, want to grow with you in faith, and want to serve alongside you, not only to help others do the same, but also to make our families and our communities better. If that sounds like something that you can get on board with, then like, follow, and drop us a comment in the video. Watch some more videos on our channel or come visit us on Sunday. You can find out more about Harbor Covenant Church at harborcov.church.